You have your slides up?
Yeah, well, I think we'll just.
And I'd like to also say is that, I mean, I have to refer to these all the time. I know there's some of you that just, I'm thinking about Jim Bland, who probably has all of this in the top of his head. But I just have to keep referring to these things all the time. Next slide. So really, water quality, water testing parameters are, there's so many things that we're taking measurements of right now. I think it's something over like 20 to 25 different items that we're recording. And lakes are very complex because they're wide open systems with so many things. If just look at that image there, there's so many things that are going into or out of water systems. The observations we make are are snapshots of what's occurring. They're not like deep movies or videos. And I think for us to understand all the different things that are going on in lakes, all the inputs and outputs, it just is an extremely interesting and complex lake. And while I'm looking at Loch Lomond and St. Mary's and doing the testing on both, and they're right next to each other, one flowing into the other, how different they also already are, both in the data that we're recording and the depths and things like that. So I put in this slide kind of on the early side, and I'm going to talk about it later. I think this is also, it reveals some of my own learning. You know, water quality and trophic state were kind of muddled together in my mind as being the same thing. And they're very much related, but they're not the same. They kind of look at different things. They use some of the same parameters. So while I'm talking about water quality, I will also be talking about trophic state at different points in this conversation. So where water quality really looks at the chemical, physical, biological characteristics, trophic state is looking at biological productivity. And those four words there, oligotrophic, mesotrophic, eutrophic, and hypereutrophic, that you have already heard of and used about your own lakes. But the differences, there are differences in the way these are. And water quality looks very closely at things like recreation activities or human health. And so I think understanding the differences and the similarities between these two things would be important for us. Next. So we're going to start off with water temperature. And obviously in the summer is when we reach the maximum water temperatures, but different fish have very different preferences, and I am not a fisherman. So some of you already know that trout prefer cooler water and bass prefer warmer water. So your lake's temperature can really impact the kind of fish that you have there. Water temperature is also, there's so many things that can impact that, from sunlight and depth, air temperature, of course. But there's the stratifications and turnovers that occur in especially deeper lakes, and the stratification in the summer and the winter, and the turnover in the spring and fall. And one of the graphs I'm going to show you later on already shows that the stratification starting earlier this month. And the last thing about this slide is that cold water just holds more dissolved oxygen than warm water does. And Paul Spivak gave me this a bit of information about 32-degree Fahrenheit water holds, 14 plus milligrams per liter of dissolved oxygen, whereas 80 degrees it's just a little over half that. So what's happening in temperatures right now with dissolved oxygen, as we look at this slide, we're going to see things even cycling day and night, with daytime temperatures obviously being warmer and nighttime being cooler. But the oxygen dissolved in water is so important for aquatic life. But what's happening in this particular slide is that at night, when it's dark, that's when the oxygen is being consumed by algae, although it's actually doing consuming day and night through the process of cellular respiration, where it's taking glucose and oxygen and producing energy, carbon dioxide, and water. During the daytime, the algae is producing oxygen during photosynthesis. So you're getting these changes in dissolved oxygen low at night or early morning, and they reach a peak sometime around, I think, between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. Next, please. And there's also this significant seasonal variations with dissolved oxygen. And this particular graph shows in the blue is the water temperature. But then in the brown or mustard colored, we're getting a significant drop during the warmer months of June, July, August, and then they start to go back up again. So as summer temperatures increase, the dissolved oxygen decreases, and that definitely affects aquatic life. Next. And actually, this particular bit of information is so important in terms of how this affects fish in particular. Sorry, my throat is just getting a little fatigued here. But at 5 milligrams of dissolved oxygen, milligrams per liter of dissolved oxygen in the upper level of the lake is the minimum that fish need to survive. Preferably, you see in the if it gets up to like twice that, it's much better. But at the less than 2 milligrams per liter of dissolved oxygen in the lowest level in the hypolimnium, that's when phosphorus is released. But it's also when very few or no fish can actually survive.
Just a quick comment, Paul. The 5 milligram per liter is a good point. Below that dissolved oxygen, fish begin to experience stress. And it also has got a time period to it. So if the 5-DO during the day is okay, at night as the DO goes down, that can be more stressful. So you've got the problem that the experiencing the DO isn't instantaneous. It's got a time lag to it. The other part of this is different fish, you pointed out, have different tolerances. So you get smaller fish, some of the fish that I was interested in, that are able to withstand very low DOs, but larger fish, like the one that you saw Robert holding up, experience stress from the DO to a much greater degree than the smaller fish. So fish kills, when they do occur, generally happen with the larger fish, not with the smaller one.
Thank you, Jim. So this was interesting because these two graphs are actually made this year actually this was from St. Mary's Lake. And it shows that for both the depth and temperature, and depth is on the vertical axis, and it's going from 0, which would be a surface level, and then the depth of the lake in inches going down the vertical axis. And across the top on the left-hand side, it's temperature, and the right-hand side is the DO. And you can see that in early May, the temperature of the lake was around 60 degrees from top to bottom. Similarly, in the second week of May, May 19th, and by June 2nd, when this was taken, already you're starting to see this stratification of temperature that about an 7 or 8 degree change from the top of the lake down to the bottom. And similarly for dissolved oxygen, by the time we got to the June 2nd date, the dissolved oxygen really dropped off at the bottom part of the lake. So we started at about 8 milligrams per liter at near the surface, down to below 1. So I don't think there are too many fish down at the bottom enjoying that lake. Next, please. So Sankey disk, which or Sankey depth, I should say, the Sankey disk is the most widely used water quality measuring device. It's been used for 160 years, and it just is such a simple thing that reveals so much about the lake clarity, algae population, sediments that are suspended, and the depth the sunlight penetrates. And of course, the sunlight's going to be really important because that will do a lot about will help with the process of photosynthesis, and improves the productivity of plant and animal life. And another, this came from Paul, was saying there's a rule of thumb that for aquatic plants, if you get 2 times the Sankey depth, they can't get enough sunlight at 2 times the Sankey depth that you're measuring. So if you're measuring 3 feet of Sankey depth, then at 6 feet, there would be practically no sunlight at that point. And if your Sankey depth is below 3 feet, it does suggest that there may be higher nutrient levels like phosphorus and nitrogen. If it's below 1 foot, then you may have lethally low dissolved oxygen, lack of photosynthesis occurring. And the Lake County median is 3 feet. The graph on the bottom left is something that's a 25 years of data from Loch Lomond. And the blue histogram there are showing the actual depth of the lake in pretty much the same location that we are measuring it. So you see the depth of the lake barely changing. But the red is the Sankey depth, and what was visible. Now 0 is at the bottom of that scale, but you can see that it really dropped below 2 feet in the warmer months, especially like in August. So these are things to know as in terms of trends of your lake, and you have an idea of what's happening in terms of the actual Sankey depth.
Yeah,
Next,
and just to
please.
clarify, Jerry, those are inches on the left-hand side
Oh,
for
you're right. You're
the
right.
measurement.
And although the values I have up at the top are talking about feet, because Lake County's median Sankey depth for our lakes is 3.1 feet.
Yeah, that's
Thanks for
great.
bringing that up.
Thanks.
E. coli is something that is being measured, and this is for our swimmers in particular. And Lake County Health Department measures E. coli. And obviously, you need to know that in case beaches need to be closed. Obviously, coming from bacterial waste, pets. I'm not sure if there's as many leaky septic systems in Lake County. There might be. I'm not familiar with it. Barnyard animals and large number of waterfowl, I think we are all very familiar with. And one goose produces more poop in a day than my 50-pound dog. It's the average of like 2 to 4 pounds of poop a day one goose produces. And geese are around about, I think 85% of geese actually still stay in Lake County year round. So that's about 1,000 pounds of poop a year. And multiply that by about, I don't know, 3 to 5 to get the number of pounds of algae that could actually be created because of that. So it's a high source of phosphorus, increased algae, algae blooms, poor water quality, and E. coli, which is unfortunate bacteria to have, and salmonella. Thank you. Next. So now we're going to talk about nutrients, and this gets a little bit complex. But ultimately, what we want is some kind of a balance. We need to have nutrients. So there's a positive and negative to nutrients. If you have too few nutrients, like nitrogen and phosphorus, that's not enough for algae to support the food web. If you have too many nutrients, you could have too much algae. It can reduce the oxygen in the water, and it could be overly nourished or well-nourished eutrophic lakes. So here's the trophic state of oligotrophic versus eutrophic. So it's trying to find that right balance of nutrients for a healthy food web, which may actually conflict with some of the things we want, like a nice lake to go swimming in. So next, please. So we would like to reduce excess nutrients that are going into our lake. And one of the main sources is fertilizers. Even though phosphorus fertilizers are technically outlawed in Illinois, you're trying to reduce the unnecessary use of phosphorus fertilizers. One of the things that could be very helpful would be, it's called a buffer strip, and I've got two images. One of them is a person's garden, and the other one is actually in the Munley Community Park pond, and it must be about a 15 to 20 foot wide buffer strip all around the pond. And this perimeter buffer strip filters runoff that could be coming from a variety of areas. And I know Loch Lomond does not have a lot of buffer strips. And I know Paul and I have been talking about his lake, and they've been increasing the amount of buffer strips in their lake to get more and more people to put them in. It's probably the most cost-effective method of reducing nutrients flowing into your lake. And also, if there's any way to reduce geese, I know we've talked about geese lights before, and but trying to reduce the waterfowl. Next, please. And nitrogen is a necessary nutrient. We need it, but the problem is if it's in excess and what that might cause. But the problem with nitrogen is that there are so many different sources. It's ubiquitous. There's so many different ways that nitrogen can flow into your lake that it is actually, and it actually is kind of more difficult to control. That doesn't mean you don't control it at all, but it means that it would be much more difficult for everyone to try to control all the different sources of nitrogen. Next, please. Phosphorus, and these next two slides are going to be overly complex, and I apologize ahead of time, but phosphorus is so biologically active and cyclic in nature, and it's probably the element most likely to cause plant production and algae blooms. There's two different kinds of nitrogen sources we talk about in broad terms. The external load, or the external sources, like fertilizers, agriculture, septic systems. And then the internal load is the decades of accumulated external load that is settled into the sediment of your lake. And up until about a year ago, I did not know anything about internal loading, but it's both sources are things that we really need to try to address. And while external sources, we can do things like stop fertilizers, add buffer strips. The internal load is more difficult. It may actually be producing over 50% of the phosphorus that's actually released in lakes. And it may take decades to actually correct if nature is left to itself to try to correct it. One suggestion, not just a suggestion, but one of the positive sources or remediation methods is something called lanthanum bentonite clays. And I was reading through a book that Jim Bland had sent to me earlier this year, and most of the ways of trying to trap phosphorus have like weak or non-existent success, whereas lanthanum bentonite clays have been very, very successful in trapping phosphorus into the sediment permanently. Next slide. And iron is naturally in your lake, and there are iron compounds. Actually, iron is just like so prevalent in throughout the world in water and in soils. And it has an interesting, this particular compound of iron is, it can both attract and release. It could be a sink and a source of phosphorus. So the compound actually has a very large surface area that allows the phosphate molecule, the PO4 minus 3, to attach to it, which is great, which that could then produce a sink. It could just like trap the phosphorus. The problem though is that if your lake becomes anoxic, if the dissolved oxygen is less than 2 milligrams per liter, and you've got a low oxidation reduction potential, or also called ORP, then that iron compound starts to release the phosphate back into the water, which is not good. So there are some natural ways that phosphorus is bound in the sediment, but unfortunately, this particular compound can both release it when the conditions are poor. Next, please. Chlorophyll is obviously one of the significant measures that we measure for, I'm sorry, for photosynthesis. Chlorophyll is an indicator. It indicates the amount of algae and phytoplankton that can be in your lake. And it indicates that algal growth. On the right-hand side, kind of created a trophic state measure where the red would be the hypereutrophic, yellow is eutrophic, mesotrophic is blue, and down at the very bottom there's a little bit of green, the oligotrophic. And the black bar in that case was a measure from a couple of weeks ago of St. Mary's Lake of the amount of chlorophyll A at a 3-foot depth. So we could also use this measure to give you a sense of the trophic state index. Sorry, let me just take a drink. Next, please. Total dissolved solids is minerals and salts that are in water. You also will see this in your measuring conductivity in your lake, and the total dissolved solids can particularly affect fish. Looks like that blurred out part of the section there. So again, I tried to create a chart on the right, or a little histogram there of the amount of total dissolved solids, and this was, for St. Mary's, it was already in the hypereutrophic state, which would not be very good for fish. And the Lake County median value is 454, which already puts it into the hypereutrophic state. Next slide is total suspended solids and a measure of cloudiness within your lake. And this particular one I liked was because just thinking about it in terms of what sequence of events happens. So if you have high turbidity in your lake, high cloudiness, the sunlight does not travel well through the water, which makes it difficult for plants and algae to grow because of lack of photosynthesis, which reduces lake productivity of plants and animals that can help support the lake. And oxygen generation is significantly reduced. So you've got a variety of different step situations here. Next is pH. And the image kind of toward on the right-hand side, not the far right-hand side, is just different kinds of fish and what pH those different kinds of fish prefer. Again, not a fisherman, but it was interesting to see that the narrow ranges for some animals. So most lakes are between 6 and 9 in terms of the pH. 7 is neutral. So fish do well in the neutral area. But if you go below 6, then you start produce stunted, reduced, or absent fish populations. If you go over 9, there's an increase of HABs, of the harmful algal blooms, because of cyanobacteria being more prevalent at that point. Next, please. Okay, so now trophic state. to get back to that biological productivity. So trophic state index, the TSI, the amount of biomass from organisms in your lake. Usually it's on a scale of 0 to 100. There are multiple, I've seen about 4 or 5, there's probably more than that, different kinds of trophic state indices that are used. The most common one seems to be using total phosphorus, which is one of the things that we've been trying to, for like our lake monitoring group, trying to get better values of phosphorus to give us a sense of what's going on. Probably one of the more important parameters to measure. But you could also do a trophic state with chlorophyll A or Sankey disk or total nitrogen. Next slide, please. So on the right-hand side is the general descriptions of each of the 4. And obviously, we think that having a clear lake that's oligotrophic, low in nutrients, good water quality is the way to go. But that might mean that there's very little biological productivity. So maybe that's not actually the preference. And we're trying to get a sense of the biological productivity of the lake. And this isn't necessarily saying that one is necessarily better than the other. Next, please. So the next few slides, kind of for us to ask the questions, well, what kind of a lake do we want? Or what do we think we need? And how do we find that balance of these things, like aquatic ecosystems? Do you want a lake that has a great aquatic ecosystem for fish, algae, plants, photosynthesis? Or do you want something that's a really super clear lake for swimming, water sports, great boating, kayaking, fishing, very few plants clogging up your motors? What about nutrients? Do you want a nutrient balance or not? Or when I had this discussion with some people in our lake, what are our different ideas of a beautiful lake? Is it something that's very natural, or is it that we want to have our lawns mowed right to the edge of the shoreline and no buffer zone at all? Do we want to have animal habitats around? So these next 2 slides are going to show you the oligotrophic, mesotrophic, eutrophic, and hypereutrophic. And notice that they're going to just, I like these slides because they have nice little images of what the lake could look like. But also here's some of the measures like of chlorophyll, phosphorus, nitrogen, or the Sankey clarity. And then what is it good for? All right, so the oligotrophic may be low in nutrients, fewer aquatic plants, great swimming, great boating, very clear and deep, but few aquatic plants. So is that good for our aquatic and plants and animals? Mesotrophic, increased nutrients, healthy, diverse aquatic plants, some algae blooms. It may stratify. You could have low dissolved oxygen. You may have a release of phosphorus. It's a balance that a lot of people look at and say, well, maybe this is the best balance of it all. You have 8 to 13 foot Sankey clarity. That sounds pretty good. Next, please. Eutrophic and hypereutrophic now. Now we're dealing with, more significant values in nitrogen and phosphorus, lower clarity, less swimming and boating. Maybe it's going to be great if you're a fisherman, though. So trying to find this particular balance. Eutrophic lakes, which many of our lakes in Lake County are, may be considered good for some things, but maybe less so if you want to have a place where you can dive in or your boat won't get clogged with motor clogged with plants. Hypereutrophic, now we're dealing with very low qualities, very high values in chlorophyll, phosphorus, and nitrogen. So very high nitrogen nutrient values, but algae blooms, a lot more carp and species that like warmer and low dissolved oxygen. They could be shallow. and very little swimming and boating, but could be great for fishing and aquatic life. So for us to think about, is this what we want? Which one of these is best for your lake? And your lake and my lake may have very different needs. Next slide, please. So one of the things I tried to create was a collection of information. Again, I started doing this for myself because I was trying to find a way to have information that I could go to and I could access easily. And I really used multiple sources to pull this together. So I think I modeled it after a group in Pennsylvania. I took information from the Lake County Health Department, Illinois EPA, multiple state organizations, and I tried to create a chart. And there's 8 pages and 2 different things here. This particular chart is trying to show the trophic state on the right-hand side, and it's color-coded, and the conditions of being impaired, moderately impaired, balanced, or very clear. So some of the same verbiage that we just saw. Does look like the yellow bar at the bottom, everything kind of got shifted over a little bit, but sorry, so that 58 inches is Seki depth. So you could put information on your lake. I just put in some values in there just to use as a comparison. But I took some of the key values that were common to both water quality and to trophic state, like Seki, dissolved oxygen, conductance, specific conductivity, total dissolved solids, salinity, chlorophyll, pH, oxidation reduction potential, total phosphorus, and soluble reactive phosphorus, which was one of the values that we've been measuring, to try to figure out, well, what values, where does that put our lake? And you can notice that each of the values, they don't all agree across the board. They may be in hypereutrophic or eutrophic or mesotrophic. But it will give you an idea of where they're at. Next page. This is the additional 7 pages. This is just the start of page 1. So I had all the different parameters listed in the first column. And then I had lake versus stream information because I found that could be very different. Although we're mostly talking about lakes in Lake County, I just think that having the values for lakes and streams could be particularly important for people. I tried to put in Lake County's median value if they had it for any particular for lakes. And I tried to put an explanation on the far right-hand side that gave a little bit more detail about what that parameter might be or what you might want to be looking for. So you can access that. There's a link. Mary, I'm trying to remember that link right there. Thank you. Nope, no, I'm sorry. That's the Understanding Lake Data. This is a great resource, Understanding Lake Data Manual, and it's on our Lake County Lake Lovers site. And it can be very helpful if you're trying to understand information about lakes. But I think it'll also be helpful to ask each other, do your own research, and share any information that you might find. And I adapted this last thing. I heard somebody say this recently about a society grows great when old women and men plant trees in whose shade they will never sit. So I added in, well, or they care for lakes in whose water they may never swim. So I think it's kind of our responsibility now to help make lakes better, even though we may never be swimming in them 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. I think that should be the last slide, right? No, the references. Thank you.
Yeah, Gerry, amazing job. Wonderful overview of all of these parameters. And I know we have some questions here. I would like to just stop sharing the screen right now and have people ask their questions. I know, Becky, you had one to start.
Right. So, and they're in the chat, and there's a lot of people, which is fabulous. So if you're comfortable going to chat and putting your questions in the chat, hopefully we can get to all the questions. I think I already said at the start of this, I'm still learning. I'm very new to this topic. So early in the talk, Gerry, you were talking about the word stratification. And I just wanted to confirm what that meant. Does it mean that you can detect different things at different depths of the lake? Or is it, go ahead.
So the stratification is usually that there's like cold on the top, warm on the top, cold on the bottom. And then the turnover may be with everything that starts mixing. The stratification is you're going to have different layers within the lake of
It's
temperature.
only layers of temperature. That's what you mean when you talk about stratification. It's only talking about temperature.
Well, the two graphs I showed were both for temperature as well as dissolved oxygen. Both of them were showing stratification already. And this should be the time of year when it would start to show up, especially for deeper lakes.
So then the word just means you're showing differences at different depths.
Right, or like you're seeing layers.
Yeah, like a cake.
Okay, it better be chocolate though.
All right, Paula, why don't you ask your question? Go ahead.
You were talking about the lanthanum bentonite clay trap. Does that have other uses for other chemicals in the lake?
I am not aware of that. I know a friend of mine who lives in Loch Lomond is an analytical chemist, and he was looking at lanthanum bentonite, and he thought that it was actually a fairly good, a safe chemical to use. Paul, do you have any comments to say about it? Because I know you have.
I'm not sure if my sound on. Is it? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, so I'm a big fan of lanthanum bentonite clay. It's kind of the new technology that replaces alum, which has it's an older technology. Alum also bonds phosphorus, and phosphorus is the main culprit for our algae blooms in many cases, most cases, I would even say. Lanthanum bonds the phosphate 7 orders of magnitude stronger than alum, but that's a million times stronger. But they're both permanent bonds, and a lot of studies have been done with lanthanum modified bentonite, and it's safe. It's a proven technology. We're going to be using it on our inlet, and eventually in our lake bottom. It's quite expensive, and that is the only negative part of it that I've been able to find out about.
One of the things about lanthanum is that you've had third-party third-party or neutral party evaluations of it. In the past, in terms of selling different types of lake chemicals, you didn't always have the opportunity to have a third-party independent evaluation of it. In this particular case, you do have that. People in Ohio did a detailed third-party assessment, including the toxicity of the applications and the efficacy. Does it work? Yes. Is it toxic? No. So that's one of the things that separates the lanthanum from other sorts of things that are used.
Thank you. There's a great example of having other people share their knowledge. So I appreciate both of you.
Paula, does that answer your question? Or do you want to have a follow-up? Excuse me, follow-up question?
Nope, thank you.
Awesome. I threw out in the chat, how would a lake go about determining which, I think we were talking about TSI level, is best for their lake? You had those last 4 images and how the, different levels cause different benefits. I thought that was a really provocative question. So I'm curious if anyone's aware of any sort of decision tree or guidance on, what I took away from that is one is not bad and one is not really the best. There's a range.
So in terms of, are you asking how to actually get the values that for your lake?
No, you were talking towards the end of your talk about how might a lake decide what their target goal would be? You know, what are the purpose? I don't know if it's determined by, I want a really clear lake and I don't want any plants because I want to be able to always have an engine, a boat motor never get tangled up. Or I really am attracting a certain fish species, or I just was curious, how might a lake team decide what their goal is there?
I think that takes a lot of discussion. I'm just thinking about the Loch Lomond Lake Committee, just wonderful people, talented people. And you get a real cross section. You got people who really want someplace where they can, we've got very slow, no wake boats going like, 1 mile an hour, but they want to have a clear path for their boat. But other people want to have clear place for swimming, and others want to have, lush aquatic plants and shoreline plants and emergent plants, and they want habitat for
Nature.
good animals, not geese.
Yeah.
So
It-
I think it takes a lot of discussion.
Is it possible to have different parts of a lake be rated differently, or one lake is one thing?
I know that some lakes will say that, okay, this area, we're going to keep all the natural plants and we're not going to put any kind of chemicals. We're not going to kind of mow them down. We want to make sure that there's a significant area of the lake that is blooming with aquatic plants. And then there's other areas they say that only for, this is a swimming area, or here's the boat zones.
Yeah.
But I think that's a committee that has to make those decisions, and maybe other people have some comments on that, on how they've made those decisions in their lakes.
Well, either way, I've heard it phrased, and maybe you could answer this, is if you track those stages, they really lead to the death of a lake when you get hyper-eutrophic, and then it sort of caves in on itself or seems to just become mud. And I think that's happened to many of the lakes in India. So that often seems to affect a dredging decision to save a lake, or a desperate effort, which we want to avoid with these measures, which is why we're doing them. But I don't know if anyone on, Jim, maybe you would want to comment, or Gerry, on that, like to sustain the lakes in the manner in which they were originated.
What Alana will say from the health department is the way what is helpful in dealing with that is doing a lake management plan. So, and that part of doing a lake management plan is you get the different folks that have different recreational and use sorts of things, and look to come together in a common, since it's used by a lot of people, look to come together with a common idea of how you want to use the lake. Is it a fishing lake? Is it are we going to use motorboats? And the size of the engine on the lake? Those are things that go into the business of coming up with a lake management plan and getting consensus amongst the folks in the lake community.
Thanks. Thanks. I had, if there are other questions, just go ahead and raise your hand or unmute. Alan?
Yes. And thank you. You went through it, and I would love to get the slides. And Mary, you put up the location to get the slides. I appreciate that. I came here tonight really interested in understanding the readings the data we're getting, particularly the dissolved energy, the two different numbers that we're getting. And could you explain a little bit how the meaning of those two numbers and how that's derived?
So So you're talking about the percent dissolved oxygen versus the milligrams per liter?
Yes.
To be honest, what I've actually been using myself has been the milligrams per liter. So I think the percent dissolved oxygen is like I thought it was more of a relative value, kind of like relative humidity. So the amount of oxygen that that the water could hold at the temperature that you're at right now, whereas the milligrams per liter is going to be a more absolute value of the amount of oxygen that's dissolved. So I've personally just been, even though I have both, and have tried to create graphs of both, I've just found that the milligrams per liter have been more helpful, but maybe someone else has a greater insight than I do on that.
Yeah, the percentage saturation for a water column, if you have no algae and just plain distilled water, water will have a certain percent up to a certain percentage at a given temperature and pressure. So there are charts of that actually exist. And but what happens is when you start to add the algae, then the percentage saturation can be different. And so those are the two sorts of things that are there. The percentage saturation is a good predictor of how actually how fish and other sorts of things are likely to respond as well.
Can hear me? It's Paul talking. The percent saturation surprisingly can go over 100% saturation. That's called supersaturation, and that's due, as Jim mentioned, to the water in the lake not being pure distilled water. It's full of organisms and algae and other things that give it a higher oxygen concentration, higher than 100%.
So I see Mary's adding, how much does the type of lake impact its health? For example, glacial lakes that are isolated or spring fed versus lakes like the Fox Lake that are fed by the river, or perhaps a man-made lake.
I'm not sure how to answer that. I don't have enough experience knowing. I think because our lake is an impoundment lake, so I've been much more focused on impoundment lakes.
What is an impoundment lake? Can someone explain what that is?
So I think it's just been a man-made dammed lake that has been created, and I think there's a pretty high percentage of lakes in Lake County that are impoundment, where they are not natural lakes. So the water's being held in there temporarily and then flowing through. But I'd love to know more about glacial lakes, but I don't know enough about them.
Yeah, the morphology and the shape of the lake, the source of the water in the lake, how long water is retained in the lake, all of those physical sorts of things have an influence on the lakes. Lakes are categorized by different in different sorts of ways. The Understanding Lake data has a description of that that is actually relatively good. So there are seepage lakes that get only groundwater seepage that come into them. There are lakes that are dammed that have surface water that comes from different types of land uses that may have nutrients associated with it. Lakes that are shallow, like Gerry's Lake, perform quite differently than lakes like Third Lake that are very, very deep. So stratified lakes, and lakes that destratify with frequency are different. So bottom line is, yes, different lakes will respond exceptionally different depending on some of those characteristics.
Love to hear from the folks who are watching. What data are you most interested in tracking and seeing trended? Because we are working on a dashboard that will show this data, hopefully trending. And then a question for Gerry or perhaps Jim or anyone who's been working on implementing restorative measures is what data is most actionable? It seems like the county is most interested in the phosphorus and mitigating that. If you have thoughts.
Well, I think some of the ones that I actually just presented in this presentation, those are the ones that I thought were the most significant of the ones. But it may very much depend upon your lake. So, I mean, if you're in, I'm just thinking about up in Prairie Crossing, I think there were some real questions about nitrogen levels that I did not have those same kinds of questions and down in Loch Lomond. So I think it depends on your different lake, and it's probably tracking the data for a year or two to figure out what are the things that are going to be most important for you. Phosphorus, though, is going to be a real key one. I would think dissolved oxygen, temperature, Sankey, those are some of the big ones right there. And I think those are the ones that are most commonly observed.
Jerry's comments are good. However, there is a problem with phosphorus. We don't have enough chemical testing in the lake communities to be able to properly manage phosphorus. It is a big deal as we have gotten or taken a look at things on the Des Plaines River. We have not been monitoring with the frequency we need to. We have not been monitoring with the frequency that we need to in regional lakes. A lot of it has to do with money, but it's not just money. It's making compromises against some things that we know are drivers in lake communities. One of the things that's very hard, is our water quality standard for phosphorus is inaccurate. One of the things that exists that's out there are ecoregion analyses of the things, and ecoregions are terrestrial areas that include rainfall, topography, soils, all of the things that drive the lakes that are part of them. And in terms of identifying ecoregions, US EPA has looked to identify those places in ecoregions that are performing well. When you compare the values that you guys are getting on your lake community, you can compare it against that area that has got minimal impact from urbanization and farming, and that is used as an index of how those land areas should perform. So, and as you take a look at the ecoregions around the country, we have got things that help to identify what the chemical metrics can or ought to be. I hope that you understand that. But it is the landed areas that help to determine how the lakes perform.
Jim, are all the lakes in Lake County in the same ecoregion or not?
Yes.
Okay,
For
so
the most part, there may be a division. I haven't looked at the ecoregion boundaries in a while. But in Lake County, I think there's two separate ecoregions that exist. But I'd have to go back and take a look at the boundaries of them in order to give you a better answer.
okay, perfect.
Question for anyone participating in the pilot or measuring a lake, and that is, how is the data inspiring members and the frequency of the data causing your HOAs or others to want to take action or to be willing to invest? I've heard some interesting examples, but Paul, maybe you could comment on that and others might follow.
Yeah, I can comment on that. We've been using some of the phosphorus testing, the YSI Model 9800 photometer, doing the phosphorus testing on our inlet versus our outlet. And we can clearly see that there's more phosphorus coming in than there is in the lake. There's more phosphorus coming in than there is leaving the lake. Therefore, we have a problem with phosphorus coming in on our inlet, and we're going to do something about it. And we did some tests with the lanthanum modified bentonite, and we saw for ourselves that the measured phosphorus concentrations were basically, we added some lanthanum modified bentonite to a bucket full of creek water, inlet creek water, and the phosphorus level became undetectable after a half hour. And that is not unexpected because it's a proven technology, but it's an important point to convince, when we're talking about funding this thing, it's important to have that kind of information.
Gerry, have you had feedback, or perhaps Stacy has heard?
So far, I think the information that we had was still kind of on the early side. So I don't think there were anything in terms of Loch Lomond. I think with St. Mary's Lake, I think for them to see early signs of stratification or for temperature and dissolved oxygen, that was something that was new. Neither lake were showing any significant amounts of phosphorus so far, and but we were not measuring the inlets and the outlets yet. We were just doing the deepest point. So I think Paul's group is onto a great strategy there.
Yeah, I know one lake was prompted to give up their July 4th fireworks in part because of what they're seeing in their lake, and we'll hear more about that hopefully next month. But to be revealed, no one can hear the lake stories in full until they show up. But anything else? I know we typically run about an hour, and Jean, thank you for joining us. Thank you. And Kurt Byrne is new, I believe. I don't know if you had any comments or questions. I just invite you to share what lake you're from and any interests.
The calls on and off for the last few months, but Cedar Lake, and as far as the testing goes, I think kind of what Gerry said, it's kind of stable at this point. We haven't seen a big shift in any of the numbers yet. Our numbers are looking pretty good, which is nice, and we hope to continue with that since we pretty much eradicated the geese off the lake for the summer so far. But I think our biggest concern right now, one of our bigger concerns, is plant life in the lake seems to be quite robust. People are getting their propellers caught and stuff like that. So we're going to take a look at addressing that, mapping the lake, aquatic plants in the lake and things like that, and trying to track how what we're doing is hopefully improving the quality of that.
Yeah, you northern lakes are amazing in the way you convene all your stakeholders around your lake groups, just like Mary Lomas and the Loon Lake effort for education and the Priscilla treatment on their Eurasian milfoil. So congrats on those. Bhaskar mentioned in the comments he's very active with India lakes and used chlorophyll C as an indicator of water quality. And I know if anyone has any questions for him, he's always happy to comment, and I can intro you. And Paul Dewitzik is new joining us, I believe, from Lake Zurich. And I don't know if you had any thoughts or curiosities, Paul. Nice to have you here.
Yes, thank you. Actually, it's all very interesting. I get involved with the water quality readings in our lake. We created a lake management plan a couple of years ago and created a bunch of subcommittees and started taking things a little bit more seriously, especially after we had some pretty bad aquatic plant growth and some problems with the lake kind of get a little out of control. So I think after the lake management plan was put in place, we put a lot of people, volunteers in charge. Now we're kind of looking more closely at trying to figure out, all right, what does this all mean in terms of what else we can be looking at, what we should be monitoring. And so this group was actually exactly what we're looking for, is being able to do any kind of collaboration and understanding from other people's experiences. So this is very helpful. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, glad you found us. And I should also mention, the Government Accountability Office 2 years ago mentioned that the enormity of things that we're measuring is slowing down the progress to actually make a decision on lakes. And they suggested that we look at dissolved oxygen across lakes as the percentage of dissolved oxygen in a lake to show the health of a lake. And we do have that report in our HABS group within Global Waterworks, which I'm putting right here in the chat. And there are many other resources available in the Global Waterworks community, as well as in Lake County Lake Lovers. And each of you has expertise and a knowledge base or a network that can contribute to the network. As Gerry has so robustly done, I will send out links if someone has the links handy for his tremendous repository of knowledge resources that he's created. So yes, yay, Gerry, and yay to everyone. Alan's put on a great presentation. Mary Lomas here, and Paul and Bill and all of you have, and Bob had a great presentation on what they were doing, both with Priscilla and with muck pellets. And so we store those things up in the Lake County Lake Lover community, so you can find them at any time. And I hope to provide a little bit more training. I think people have asked for that, but I know we have many different things going on. We want to honor your time unless there are other questions or thoughts here. Did Bill Cody, if you're still here, I would love to have you make a little announcement on the matching gift opportunity.
Well, Mary, we were very successful in getting an opportunity from a major corporation in the Chicagoland area, but we now have a family who is willing to participate in helping us fundraise, and that they will contribute $2,000 in matching funds. So we would like to reach out to all of you or friends of yours on the lake to maybe contribute to our organization by the July 17th meeting out at Docks. If you would like to go ahead and contribute, you can contact Mary. We are a 501(c), so it is a tax deductible item, and we will certainly be happy to take your funds and use them in a very judicious way. We are using them mostly for our water quality, for the absolute needs that we have to have in testing our lakes, from water bottles to testing equipment. So we'd always enjoy a check from you, and please think about it. And we would really enjoy your volunteering more than your money.
Right, it's a team effort, takes a village to save our lakes, and that is true of all water projects because of the number of different sectors that get involved: government, education, the science behind it, the labs, the business users, and the leisure enjoyers, and we hope to have more of those. So on that topic, if anyone's in the area tomorrow, we will be at lunch in the park, Cook Park, with youth doing the Eagle Eye quiz to be a better guardian of our lakes. And one of the topical questions is, which would you prefer to have if you're an eagle? And I'll let you guys all ponder this. Would you prefer to see a little pug dog, 20 pounds, or a goose on your lake, 20 pounds? And I think Gerry gave us a hint as to the answer. Gerry, you want to tell which would the eagle want if he wants his lake healthy?
Did you say a pug dog?
Pug dog.
Pug dog. Oh, okay. I don't know. What do eagles eat? They probably would like either, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's to keep the lake clean, so they only want to see 1 pound of poop, which is
Okay.
pug dog.
Oh yeah.
Leaving on a very positive note here.
Sorry.
So, yeah, we have some other
Thank you.
fun quizzes for the kids. And you can also earn an eagle sticker or a heart for identifying the lake that you love. And so, Mary Lomas, great job with your Loon Lake. Did you have any updates or thoughts to add? You have a festival this weekend. And you're muted. So they have their big picnic, I think.
Yeah, that's in July, Mayor. But I
Oh.
wanted to know, if you need any permits, because I know, that, Kurt mentioned getting rid of the geese, which we have a huge problem with the geese. And he had mentioned, Adeline, the eggs. Oops.
Yeah, thanks. We did have to get a permit from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources to do that. And we actually partnered with the city of Lake Villa to do parts of the areas that we didn't have permission for. So yes, you do have to get a permit. And if you are interested in how to do that, I can send you some information.
I'm going to give a shout out to Kurt and to Ed in particular and to the Ridgeways. I believe Jean's on the call tonight, Mike. This has been done for very low cost, only gas money, and just lots of volunteer hours. So for those who are fiscally stretched, talk to Kurt and Ed or myself, and we can tell you how we did it.
And that was an enormous effort and very nice to see that group convening, Alan, under your leadership and everyone playing a part. So thanks, guys. And I want to acknowledge Becky and Bill, our co-chairs of Lake County Lake Lovers. And we are very excited about the number of different prongs of activity going on. And as Bill said, we would like more volunteers. So any final comments as we close? I see, Becky, your mic is open.
I'm just thrilled with what we accomplished tonight. Gerry, I learned so much from you. It was outstanding. And I know we will come back to this and we will tell our friends. There will be a recording that will be available so that those who were not able to join tonight, we can replay it. I took pictures. I learned a lot. I still have more questions, but what a great opportunity to learn. And I can't think of any higher praise than Jim Bland just smiling and nodding because he is our resident total expert with his work down at the Field Museum, no less. So I'm just really proud of how Lake Lovers is meeting needs, changing narratives, and we're doing it collaboratively and helping each other, which is why we're here. And we seek to see lakes improve. And please, if you haven't yet bought a ticket to come out to Bangs Lake in July, we would love to have you come. We're going to be telling stories of the so what's happened with this data that we've been collecting on these 12 lakes, of course, sharing a meal and networking, talking to each other like we were doing tonight about what's working, what's not, and helping some lake not maybe take a turn for the worse if they can avoid it, or hey, we've tried this, we've addled eggs, right? And that's having a positive impact. So, and it didn't cost anything more than gas and volunteer time. So that's what we're all about. So please join us in July, and that will take the place of a virtual meeting. We'll all be in person, hopefully enjoying a beautiful night like tonight with a sunset, and it should be spectacular. We only can have 120 people. And we're predicting to sell out. So if you haven't bought tickets, please make sure you come. We want lakes that are in the pilot, lakes that are not in the pilot, and we're really excited to collaborate.
Absolutely. So, so thank you, everyone. And since I see these beautiful faces and we want to remember and build the community, is it okay with everyone if I take a picture right now? And Jean and Paul and Bhaskar and Deb, if you might unmute your videos, then we'll try to get everyone together. Here. I think Thank you so much. So, oh, with a happy tag. Oh, look at the duo.
Oh, I
Jean
love
and
it.
Ed, right? Thank you for joining and thank you for your addling for the geese control and the PR. Great. Well, Gerry, thank you for joining us on your vacation. That's pretty amazing. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your vacation, and we won't take any more of your time, but it has been a great immersion. And we know you've been immersed for a long time, curating all of this and packaging it for us. So that's been hugely helpful and we appreciate it. And yes, round of applause for
Round
Gerry.
of applause.
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay,
Gerry.
good night,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
I'll put this out on the community.
Good night.
See you there.
I'll see you
Okay.
tomorrow, Mary.
Great. Hope to see more.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Here.